Welcome to Weirdest Movies of All Time, where I dissect the meaning behind some of the more bizarre works in cinematic history. Today we return to the 1970s, which saw a majority of the weird films I've covered in previous episodes, and in 1974, director John Boorman came out with one of the most visually intriguing and perplexing science fiction movies of the decade, Zardoz, starring the original James Bond, Sean Connery. Connery was playing a very different role here as sort of anti-hero in a post-apocalyptic world in the year 2293. He plays Zed, which some of you may know as the British letter Z, and like the last letter of the alphabet, Zed is an ender of all things, an executioner working for a religious cult that has taken over this world in the name of the god Zardoz. Zardoz appears as a floating head over the barbaric wastelands, pronouncing his dictates, number one of which is, "The gun is good, the penis is evil." For the cult of Zardoz seeks to eliminate the remainder of mankind through prohibiting procreation, setting the executioners upon them to kill the dregs of the survivors. But this plan goes awry when Zed is approached by one of the hidden leaders of the society, Arthur Frame, the actual voice behind Zardoz, who encourages Zed to learn to read, rediscover the history of the pre-apocalypse world, and learn the truth behind the facade. The roots are in Frame using the Wizard of Oz as the basis of his idea for Zardoz, deriving that name from the book's title, Zardoz. Zed then travels within the giant head into the vortex where the leaders, called the Immortals, have created a perfect community in order to salvage the remainder of civilization. And of course, Zed, the barbarian, manages to wreck their perfect enclosed world, tearing apart the pseudo-religious cult in order to free the enslaved society. I'll try not to give away too many details, as this really is a movie you should see for yourself, as in addition to being extremely bizarre, it seems to have many deep layers of meaning to it, involving the truth behind all of life and society. Like all good science fiction, its depiction of the future is really saying more about society today, and I think it's ultimately about how societal elites create religion to enslave the masses, but in the end they find that they themselves are enslaved by the religious strictures they've created. For the perfect community of the Immortals, despite a pretense of democracy through voting on punishments, is a dictatorship that will not tolerate any dissent, sentencing their renegades to aging but not allowing them to die. And these renegades are imprisoned in a sort of old age home where they dance away their days in senility. Yes, all the ideal societies ultimately succumb to corruption, a pretty tired old story, but it's Zardoz's visual metaphors that really give the movie its flair. From the early 20th century tuxedos and music in the prison of the dissenters, the Victorian and classical aspects of the past civilization the Immortals are trying to preserve, to the wasted barbaric landscape of the Outer Lands, and the contrasting future high-tech in the Immortals' labs. And of course Zed's Barbarella-inspired uniform, just look at that codpiece. There are many campy elements to this movie, and it kind of reminds me of the classic Logan's Run, which came out a couple of years later and seems typical of the sci-fi zeitgeist just before Star Wars changed everything. But still, at its core, it's a pretty intellectually based story, so check this one out and see what you think about the almighty Zardoz. Next time, we again analyze another classical bizarre movie from the 1970s, but this one takes place in the present, meaning the 1970s, or does it? You'll learn why we've got to qualify it like that when we take a look at The Day Time Ended. That's next time on Weirdest Movies of All Time.